Next. All right, so excited. So great to see everyone. I'm Christina Francis, Executive Director for JFFLabs. For those who don't know me, we are super thrilled to have you with us today for this meaningful, and I promise it will be exciting conversation. We've been having some of these conversations internally as a team, and we decided to really open this discussion up. I think for many of you, you know that JFF Labs, we serve as the telescope and periscope. So we are looking outward and around the corner at the opportunities of, the risks of, the implications of, and today the imperatives and urgencies of new models, technology. Whether we're considering a global mobile workforce, if we're considering national security, if we're considering the way that families are thinking differently, as we're considering data protection, we know that we all have to be together at the table having this conversation, especially as JFF aims to help 75 million Americans facing systemic barriers get into a quality job. So today, Eugene, who's leading our lifelong learning practice, and Sharon, who leads the Verifiable Credentials Project and our digital infrastructure and equity initiatives, will be joined by an expert panel who's going to talk about the landscape of skills, analysis, translations, advising platforms, and I'm sure much, much more. So put your seatbelts on. This is going to be a fun conversation. We're learning a lot. We're interrogating systems, and we ask that you join us in that conversation. And we're working really to make sure that everyone experiences work and learning in a way that dignifies their transition into economic advancement. So we ask that you engage, ask questions, offer insights, and don't let this be the last time you join us. We will provide ways at the end for you to stay in conversation, or if you're interested in joining us on this journey. So I will kick it off to Eugene and the team, and we'll get started. Thank you again so much for joining.
Thanks so much, Christina. Really appreciate that. For those that don't know me, it's great to meet you all. Thank you so much for carving out some time to join us. As Christina mentioned, I'm the managing director here in JFF Labs, leading an incubated line of practice called lifelong learning. Our goal is to explore, identify, and codify diverse learning experiences and better connect those to our systems of learning and work. Our mission, as it aligns with JFF's overarching North Star, is to understand and unlock really human potential, and in order to really enable people to access, advance, and even create quality jobs and careers. Core to this mission and the conversations that Christina's stated that we've been having internally is the topic of today's discussion, and really our ability to define and translate experiences in a transparent and accurate way. The technology that's available to us has really allowed us to facilitate this activity at scale. But with the rapid adoption of these platforms, we believe it's the right time to talk about the risks and challenges these platforms present. And this is not meant to dampen, our enthusiasm or the efforts in artificial intelligence, machine learning to scale these endeavors, but it's in the spirit of highlighting the immense opportunities we see in the benefits to overall ecosystem impact and the accelerated development we can achieve through this collective understanding and deployment of design principles. So ultimately, as Christina noted, our call to action is really for you all to join us in this mission. We encourage you to share questions in the chat as we kind of go through this conversation and discussion. And at the end of the conversation, we'll leave about 10 minutes for some Q&A. So with that, I'm really excited to kick this off, and I'll hand over the mic to Sharon Liu, who is our executive resident for the Verifiable Credentials Project, Senior Director for Digital Equity here at JFF Labs. Sharon, feel free to take it away.
Thanks, Eugene. So welcome again to everyone for joining us. I'm really excited about this conversation. This is something that internally as a labs team, and I think anyone who has ever been in a meeting with me knows that we have had this conversation on and off for quite some time. My favorite game is the LinkedIn Easy Apply, what jobs do my profile match game. And I was telling the group earlier today that the jobs that match my profile today are virtual travel advisor, game capture director, and very befittingly, this live streaming influencer and host job, which requires me to engage with live events, collaborating with other influencers, and interacting with the audience. So I think that what we'll do is we'll take this recording, I'll easy apply and perhaps have a new job by the end of the week. But just as context for why we're also doing this is we want to have the conversation about what does it mean for my profile to match a job, and and while that is exciting to explore other things that could be interesting career pivots for me, I think that there are consequences and stakes for this. And I think that as labs, what we like to do is think about not only what do we do with the technology that someone has built and put in front of us, but thinking about all of the ways that collectively we can design technology so that it suits the purposes of all of our stakeholders. So I'm really excited about this panel. Usually we think, oh, well, we have one person who's the data perspective and one person who's the technology perspective and one person who can provide some social policy context. But in this case, all of our panelists know all of these things very well. So I think that what we'll do is a general roadmap for where we're going to go is we're going to talk a little bit about the context for this. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the prompts that got us to where we are. We do want to take a deeper dive into what we think are the different opportunities. So thinking about how can we make the data context better? How can we start thinking about which foundational models for AI and machine learning are appropriate to our context? And, right or wrong, are there good matches, better matches, and what are the consequences if there are not? And then let's talk a little bit about how we can challenge all of us on this call who are listening to this to sort of partner and work together on making this ecosystem better for everyone. So the first person that I have the pleasure of introducing is Jina Krause-Vilmar. She's the CEO of Upwardly Global. And actually the paper that their organization put out last year is something that we have discussed quite extensively internally as being able to highlight some of the key social impacts of this technology. And I wonder, Jina, if you can talk a little bit about sort of the conceptions or misconceptions about the stakeholders that you serve and what sort of led you to want to have this particular dialogue about the technology.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to be here. So for those of you who don't know Upwardly Global, we specifically work with work-authorized immigrants, refugees, and asylees as an underrepresented population. They make up about 29% of the workforce, and they contribute 100% of growth to our working age population today. And so this community is very important in the workforce conversation and how we're thinking about ensuring that AI allows for greater access to service for them. One of the reasons we wanted to test some of these tools, well, one is we got really excited about the tools, right? So the idea that we could have a career navigation tool, which is one of the biggest barriers for our community, which would allow our community to be able to answer the question, what jobs do you qualify for? What jobs am I marketable? Am I competitive? Do I need a relicense? Do I need a recredential? What job titles do I look for when I'm applying for jobs? That's one of the first questions any newcomer has when they come into the United States, in particular those who already have mid or high skills or degrees or work experience. And we thought that if we could have a tool that helped us answer this question, it would be groundbreaking. And so that was really the impetus to sort of go into this adventure. I would say one of the biggest takeaways for us is that our community is really an edge case community. We are outside of the norm because we do not drive enough business value compared to the average use case or the average person who is closer to the center of the bell curve. And as a result, these technologies are not designed with, by, or for our communities, and therefore don't benefit from them. One of the biggest concerns we have around that is this particular tool is being considered to be used by the state of New York for their job centers. So we know there's huge implications for our community because if they're reducing the number of job coaches in these job centers to augment that with this technology, that's going to already become a barrier for our people to even get access to a coach. That becomes a double barrier for access to service. And so this has also become a call to action since then for us. Everybody knows that right now that there are, those who are designing AI capabilities are not representative of diverse communities, whether that's around gender or color. And so it's not then surprising, I think, that we find that that's also the case for immigrant, refugee, and asylee populations who sit at multiple intersections.
Thank you for that introduction. The next panel, we'll come back to several of the things that you said that I thought were really interesting. And so I think let's turn it over to Sterling Smith. Sterling runs a website or a company that is called Freelancer Hub, and I think you're working on something called Right Match. And I know that this entire conversation may potentially seem like we are very down on some of these matching tools, including the ones that you are putting together. But I wonder if you might reflect on how you've been thinking about how these tools should work, and how, to Gina's point, it can be more representative of a more diverse user base rather than just the middle of the bell curve.
Certainly. I'll start by saying, first and foremost, thank you, Eugene, Christina, Sharon, and everyone at JFF for inviting each of us to join the call. I'll start kind of briefly at the beginning of Freelancer Hub and Right Match. You know, my background's in software development. I've worked for Lockheed Martin, Booz Allen, Walmart as an engineer, was an entrepreneur residence at Google. And about just a few years ago, went online because I was building a software company in the retail tech space. And I went online to help because it's really hard for diverse, specifically Black founders, to receive venture funding. I went online to find an alternative source of funding by joining Upwork, which is kind of a freelancing website. I was on Upwork for 6 weeks and trying to throw every combination at the algorithm to get a job, and didn't get hired until I changed my profile picture to be a white male. And that informed me that there was like a critical, deep-rooted problem, not with Upwork or not with platforms like it, but with unconscious bias in hiring. So I ended up accepting a role as a venture investor, because why not? And ended up working for a venture fund the last couple of years. But I couldn't let that problem go. The last 2 years, I actually moved me and the family to Bentonville, Arkansas, where I've been investing in startups from this location, and really kind of with a targeted focus on bringing founders in general, but through a diverse lens from my perspective, which has been exciting. But the last year, after really kind of focusing and thinking about the problem, worked with colleagues in my fund and decided that I could allocate time to focus on solving that problem that was a stone in my shoe. I could never forget about my experience, having to change my profile picture to pattern match on the workforce. So ended up building a community called Freelancer Hub, which effectively is Upwork for diverse talent. We have Black freelancer, we have woman freelancer, we have Latinx freelancer, we have veteran freelancer, and we've been asked to start silver freelancer. But we have over 6,000 members in our community all over the last 18 months. But we started by bringing Black freelancer to market in Q4 of last year. Well, whenever we brought that to market, we began to talk to CTOs and invite them to use the platform and hire talent on our community, because they said, if you build this, we will come, so to speak. You heard that before, right? Well, we built it, and we built it in conjunction with type feedback loops with some of them. And when it came to go and play some of this exceptional diverse talent through the platform, they said, hey, this looks great, but how do we know they can do the work? So just another hurdle that we said, okay, we can help solve for that. And the way that we went and solved for that problem, effectively, long story short, is by leveraging, kind of going back to first principles and leveraging technology to help solve it. And it just so happened that, in the age of and the post Open API public beta access of November 2022, AI was something that we considered and effectively decided to incorporate into this tool that we call Right Match. And what Right Match is, if you visit joinrightmatch.com, you can learn more about it. But it's effectively a platform that helps those skeptical hiring managers send objective skills and cultural-based assessments that are generated by AI. And effectively, that first skills-based assessment that you would take as a candidate who's looking for a job is handled by our solution. So we have no aspersion that it will replace the entire hiring process. But we do know that it will provide that this multi-sensory approach will provide more insight about hiring the right person than if you were to use, traditional means. And a couple things that we'll say in closing are that we know that 75% of executives will tell you, according to Career Builder, that they've hired the wrong person. And on average, it costs $18,700 in hard cash when you hire the wrong person. And we know that can be avoided using technology. If you bring together the right people and you create objective and unbiased assessments to help candidates be successful during the interview process. And so, again, I'll land the ship there. There's a lot more to share, but I'm so excited to be here, and thanks for including me in this conversation.
Thank you. I jotted down a couple of questions that I want to circle back with you on, but let me introduce Amber, Garrison, Duncan from the Competency-Based Education Network. Amber, I wonder if you can also talk a little bit about your unique perspective on matching and the data that's necessary to make that happen.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Great to see new faces and hear stories of skills mismatching and matching, and a lot of the work we need to be doing together. And my background and my entrance into this conversation comes with just what I do day to day, which is making sure that education and training is based on competencies and skills. And CVN has been working on this for about 10 years and making sure that the types of learning and education that we're providing for people is based on, again, what they actually know and can do versus time spent on a job or time spent in a classroom, which means we have to get very, very clear about what does it mean for someone to be able to know something, to do something, and demonstrate that. It is a much more complicated issue than I think we give it credit for. How we got more into the skills matching game was when people were trying to understand, okay, if I'm trying to recognize what someone already knows and can do and get them on a personalized pathway to the next thing, or to convey to an employer what they know and can do, what is the type of data and information I need to be able to have? How do I store that? And then how do I share that with an employer or platform to match it? And it was in that external sharing moment that we, particularly in our work with Navajo Nation and with Alabama, we started to see all kinds of things like Sharon shared in her early piece of like, whoa, if this can go really wrong. But where we've been able to steer it and train the AI more accurately is when we've used this really good competency and skill data. That includes 4 particular things. One is the knowledge base, the actual skill, the behaviors to demonstrate that, and the context in which I've demonstrated that. And when we've been able to craft the data, and I've shared, I think with Sharon before, we do a bit of sentence diagramming with these statements to be able to train the AI, but that's where we're getting richer matches and being able to do better translations. And so we have become kind of this, are shifting our tone too, to there has to be public infrastructure for this and good public data on skills to be able to train all of these different products better, or else we're all going to fall underneath the weight of this issue. The other piece that is really important is we also are doing this in the context, at least in the US, in a couple of places where we're doing the translation between English and Spanish, or we're doing the translation between different languages. And again, how do we account for the contextual information, that things that may not translate, as we have learned, in particular, as people are transitioning from different countries, a lot of the times what they have are the knowledge base and the behaviors, but the skill may be different because the technology I'm using to do something is different. And so, like for taking blood pressure, it may just be that, again, the device was different, or maybe the safety protocols were different. So that's why that rich data is so important. But again, as we start to get into translations, we're really going to have to be even more, I would argue for more data is more helpful, and more quality data, so that we can make better skills matches as we do this. The thing that I worry we go to as an easy solution in this is everyone says, well, let's just make a framework of common language and it'll solve for it. We've also learned the hard way over 10 years, like that isn't working either. because people are people, and this is still human. We're just humans trying to communicate. We're all going to have different regional dialects even, or different pieces that are unique to us just trying to talk and the way that we form our sentences. And so being able to accommodate more of that and use, natural language processing or other tools to help us do that. But again, we're going to have to train these tools appropriately to be able to accommodate all the diversity of languages that do exist and will continue to exist. So that's what we're learning so far. We have so much to learn still, but again, thank you for having me and for this conversation that's so needed and the evolution of these tools.
Thank you, Amber. And I think you pointed out something about language, which is something that really struck me in that Upwardly Global report. Jina, I wonder if you could elaborate on some of the reasons why you thought there was the skills mismatch, or sort of subpar recommendations for your clients.
Yeah, it's interesting because someone was like, well, was it the language that was used in the resume? And was it about improving the language in the resume? And my response is it's about the contextualization. So Amber, that really resonates with me because really when you're talking about skills that are associated with a job, it's how do you contextualize those skills in the job that is difficult to translate, I think, when you're trying to match it against labor market data or employers' job openings. I would also say two things that are really important for our communities is skill adjacency and transferable skills. So how are these models also thinking about what kind of, if you were a physician, if you were a nurse, if you were X, that is a regulated industry. But what are the skill adjacent jobs that you can take? You can be a coordinator on a hospital floor. You can be the data coordinator for public health research. You can do so many other things that doesn't necessarily require you to go back into medicine and becoming a physician, which is a long and lengthy and expensive process in the United States. But there are those skill adjacent opportunities. And then I think the second one I mentioned about, transferable skills, because a lot of our people will work low wage jobs for several years before they're able to get back into their careers, or they will have been in refugee camps, as an example, or in the process of displacement. That just takes years off of their resume, so to speak. And so how are we capturing and contextualizing those transferable skills so they're still seen as valuable in skills? And how is that then captured? And so I think for that, there are those things. And then, of course, if you word the word engineer, the AI could pick it up and say, oh, you mean a civil engineer, you mean a product engineer, and those are completely different things. And so really understanding, it's almost like we're training the AI, but we're also training our data sets so that the AI can pick up on what we need it to pick up on. And I think that complexity just becomes more and more prevalent as you're talking about, job titles in one country do not translate to job titles in another country, but also job titles in one company don't translate to job titles in another company. And so there's that variety and the lack of overall taxonomy, I think, in this context that then makes it a challenge.
Okay, so putting the spotlight on you, Sterling, because you are a builder of such technologies. Given what Amber and Jina have just said, how do you think the sort of technologist community can start accounting for the necessity for the richness of data, or training the machines on a little bit of a sort of putting them on a better track?
Yeah, I mean, I think that in these early days, there needs to be a very reticent stance from the creators and the curators of the data. More specifically, I think it's critical to understand that for all involved to understand that there will be mistakes made, and there need to be tight feedback loops, and kind of customer obsessed, equitable, customer obsessed rather, products to rise, because there will be leaders in this space. It's usually going to be those leaders that receive the most funding, based on my experience. And we need to make sure that as part of the process, the right forces are being backed, in the sense that, there will be funding allows for. I'm sorry to obsess over funding, but it's critical because it allows for the ability to make mistakes and rapidly iterate, and also allows for the companies that went to eventually get it right. And I think the kind of the devil's in the detail there, but understanding that the teams they're building have to have a diverse perspective, need to have a diverse community building the solution, and in addition to feedback from the end user, I think somewhere in that combination exists hopefully the ideal future of work and the future of talent.
Can I just ask something quickly? Sorry, but I have two questions to that, Sterling, which is one, what's included in what we not only what we capture, but what data the AI needs. Like for immigrants, it's just different. Like work authorization, it makes a difference. You wouldn't include that typically in HR, like recruiting AI tools, because that's not something you think about, or what kind of visa category that you have. And we see all the time that drop-down menus make a huge difference in terms of our community's ability even to be able to have education that's seen and valued, because it's not made in America. And so I think for us, it's also a question of how the technology is designed and who's included in the design. And then I would say back to Amber's point, like who's training the AI? And I think the challenge is for a lot of underrepresented communities, we don't have great data infrastructure and architecture.
Yeah.
We're not in the data. I mean, actually, I just learned from a colleague that, most of Africa does not have access to internet. So all of their life experiences are completely erased if it's going to be about training AI to be adapted to their needs for anything like financial inclusion, et cetera. So sorry, those are roadblocks that we've hit.
No. So a couple things. To your first point, my perspective is that we need to have a diverse group of customers on the customer advisory board. We have a robust customer advisory board at Freelancer Hub and at RightMatch. That and like Jina, what you're working on in the community you represent, we need you or folks like you on our customer advisory board, because you're going to quickly tell us that we need certain properties included in the drop downs that ensure that maximum inclusion is considered. At Freelancer Hub, again, think about a marketplace like Upwork, but all the talent's Black in one community, or all the talent's women, or all the talent are Hispanic, right? And so we are really in each of those communities doing things that have never been done before. As a matter of fact, whenever I built Black Freelancer First, which is our pilot community, I was thinking of myself. I was like, man, I'm a Black male from Texas. I saw you from Texas too, Jina. But I'm a Black male you lived in Texas for a while. But you too, Amber? Nice. Okay, hook 'em. But I'm a Black male from Texas, and I was looking at my perspective and saying, hey, like, how come I can't get a job on Upwork with my background and what's going on with me? But whenever we put it in the market, 4 out of 10 people that signed up were in sub-Saharan Africa. And we were like, wait, how do we feel about this? And we quickly adopted the perception that, oh my gosh, we're excited about this, because there are a billion people who are overlooked today. And many of them are ready and willing and eager to be successful in the marketplace. And so that's just one example of when you turn the focus to the dark side of the moon, so to speak, and like in the sense that like an area, and you shine a light where there hasn't been light shown, and you provide access where access hasn't been allowed to date, then you'll see that there's cost savings. There's exceptional talent. There's financial upward mobility for both the earlier stage and the enterprise companies are willing to bet on that region and the people that live in those communities and a global impact. And so I deeply empathize and am excited about what you're building at Upwardly Global. And I see that there's also a huge, tremendous opportunity in places like Africa. And I think having a customer advisory board that's providing that perspective while these products are being built, as well as having communities that are impacted, that are a part of that feedback loop, is critical in the early days and along the way.
And related to that, Sterling, I would love to hear, because this is I think there are few platforms who would say their major when we think about the customer, their customer to date has been the employer, because that's who's been footing the bill for advertising on the LinkedIn or whatever. And I don't think it's been until we've seen some of these more public investments in talent pipelines, whether that's at a state level or, again, someone who's got the public eye on who's not accessing, right? And so, being able to see, again, either states or countries or other folks invest in some of this to try to right size who the customer is, and the customer ultimately for those folks are it's citizens, it's people seeking new citizen or are coming in. And I would love to see either ways we restructure investments, or again think about the public eye on these, so that again it starts to get right size off of, again, what LinkedIn has struggled with. And they would say this of, I'm not going to find welding jobs on LinkedIn. I'm going to find other types of jobs on LinkedIn. And so we've got segmented labor markets happening, let alone segmentation of people and access to those jobs. So we're just replicating occupational segregation and discrimination and trying to, right? So I like your point of shifting the customer. And I think that's been part of the hard part of this is, and where public investments, whether that's through private foundations or public, again, building infrastructure like states, again, like Alabama or Navajo, we're starting to learn more because we can do that. But I would love to see more of that. Sorry, what's the real point of that?
No, I think this is perfect because, collecting data, like data exploitation, is actually one of my favorite things to rant about. And actually, so I think that we're hearing a couple of different things where there's a little warning that just went off in my head, right? So there's not good enough data about certain populations, and so we should focus on collecting data for those populations. But at the same time, I feel there are entire sort of cultural and social just non-technical issues around potential for exploitation around those populations and data. And I'm wondering, Amber, if I'm not putting you on the spot to reflect on racism in the South, right? But, in even working with populations like the Navajo population that you work with, getting more rich data about them, how do you interact in a way that is, I don't know if reassuring is the right way, but to build trust in the communities so that they believe that these tools will ultimately serve them?
Oh, absolutely. That's such a good, it's a tool, right? It's not, I think sometimes we can overhype this of human connection is still really important. And I would say in Navajo in particular, where, Jina, to there's not broadband access everywhere, and thinking about how we reach people who are extremely rural communities with these tools in Alabama, where we do have education deserts, even a state that as a Texan, I would say Alabama's a small state. And I was like, what do you mean there's education deserts here? But the same things exist in lots of pockets across the country and across, sovereign nations. And so thinking about building trust means we've embedded ourselves into those communities in a relational way, saying, how does this tool help you accomplish what you're trying to accomplish? And I think that's where we've learned too. I mean, anytime we walked into a school or talking with folks who are doing advising, or you can hear their voice saying, I've never had access to this data. So in Navajo Nation, there was never a job board that had all public and private sector jobs. We bring in a job board that's built in the way that they've asked us to build it. And they're like, thank goodness I now have this, right? And I will use it because I helped you design it. And so that's where, again, embedding in existing organizations and community groups that are trying to solve for these issues, but have lacked good data to do it. That's really what we're talking about, is making that data visible and available and more actionable so that they can do the things they've been wanting to do, which is to help people find work or help people find education opportunities where they are. So yes, not coming in a top down, we're this tech savior, and building with the people and iterating as much and fast as possible. I think that's both our technology partners in those spaces have been really good at listening, again, to the different customers of what do you need. And the example, Jina, you gave around the visas, well, when we're sitting down with individuals who are working parents, they want to see what benefits those employers provide. Or maybe I need transportation because I use a wheelchair to do that. I need certain types of transformation. Our job seekers are telling that that's something they want to see in a matching situation. So again, things that you maybe wouldn't have considered if you were just taking that employer lens of saying, find me the fastest talent based on skill. And it's, how do we really empower the user and create opportunities for them to give us feedback too, on what they want to see, but also help us train the AI better. Like Sharon, I always think about your cat situation. It's like, I want to give that a thumbs down. Like, why can't I tell LinkedIn to quit sending me these stupid matches? Like, you put me in control of my data a little more. But again, it's that those types of things I think continue to build and foster trust as a tool that's here to serve me and help me.
Thank you. And for context, my favorite LinkedIn recommendation was to be a cat carer. I don't know where that came from, but my skills matched, my profile matched that job. So I think that you said something, and Sterling also said something about like rapidly iterating and testing and then giving feedback. And this sort of prompts me to think about something that Jina also you said in the paper about the consequences of this, right? So like if we are testing on a group of people who are already struggling, like what should we be thinking about in the testing? And then like if we do get it wrong, like if it's not a right match, like what should the consequences be? Like, is it the responsibility of the technology developers, the responsibility of the counselor, like who contributes to the solution when there is a mismatch?
You have Jina, please. Please.
I just love you have 3 Texans here. That's crazy. We're gonna solve this, guys.
So I'm gonna call out Mina too. She's a Texan.
Oh, well, hello. So I would say for us, it's a huge concern because it actually increases trauma and it decreases the likelihood that people will continue to engage with the service. So if you're, if you're struggling and you're just trying to invest in doing the right things and you don't believe that you can make it in the United States, like so much of what we do is to encourage people to stay motivated because it is a long, hard process and there is uncertainty around it. And then to have AI tell you actually the best thing you can hope for is to be able to fold bed sheets is devastating for people, and not to mention people who are impacted by conflict. And so for us, we have a huge accountability to ensure that we don't put anything in front of our job seekers that we feel like doesn't have high confidence in being able to produce the results that we're looking for. And so we, as representing the community and working on behalf of the community, would say it's our responsibility. But you better believe, I think it's the responsibility of our tech provider because we give them that feed forward. And the challenge is it's not a question of tagging on the back end to course correct for a specific incident. It's about how do we train the AI in total so that it doesn't make a similar kind of mistake later. And so for me, the importance of data is critical because we can't train AI with nothing. And we can't train AI with small data sets. And so this is something we have to solve for as a community. And so one of the things that I'm really passionate about is how do we enhance knowledge sharing and collaboration networks? Because what you really have is community-based organizations or nonprofits that are representing underrepresented communities that are all trying to figure out how to do everything on their own, whether it's getting a data audit, setting up a CRM system, whether it's getting a monitoring and evaluation plan to inform that, whether it's about then testing AI to see if it will or will not work or customizing it, which is the reality for more smaller nonprofits because they're unlikely to create their own AI capabilities. So how is that knowledge being shared? How are we collaborating and how are we creating some guidance and guardrails around this? And then how are we using that to inform that what I call the AI value chain, right? Because we aren't the creators of these capabilities, right? So we're at the bottom in terms of using them as a service. And if that's the case, how are we then being able to funnel up the value chain so that the quality of the products that are coming down are aligned? And I do think there's also a great opportunity because I don't think there's anybody in the space in the ecosystem who's taken on this role. And so I think there's a real opportunity to sort of start building that.
Gina, I would just flag, we are in the process now, just as a starting point, and would love to have as much input and involvement in this is, again, how can we as CVEN, a public nonprofit, provide open access to data to better train AI? So we are asking our partners to unlock their data, that we've helped them build competency statements and all those things that we talked about. Context matters. Can we serve as a conduit for these statements to be published, and then say, if you're going to train AI, this is the community that you can lean on for all of our tech partners, because we also know we can't scale this work without our technology partners and our community partners. And so as we get that launching, again, we're going to just start with the data we have, but would love to add as much as possible to that hub and see how far we can take it.
Yeah, so innovating on the infrastructure level, where the open AIs and the Microsoft with Copilot and some of these other solutions and data models is incredibly resource intensive. So you'll find that most of us who are innovating, who are not at the services level, are at the application level, and so I think that there's a lot of great work. We're like, for example, we lean on OpenAI's API for most of our base level, AI engagement, and we have our own model that we train on top of that, based on the data that our users share with us. Now, how do we? You mentioned something about who's responsible whenever things hit the fan, and what I'll say is, it's in our case, it's large in part the technology provider. And knowing that we have that awesome responsibility, we do have those tight feedback loops that we discussed. So we have on the community side, where all the talent is, we have something called Freelancer Friday, where every Friday for the last 52 weeks, and maybe a few more, we've had these Zoom meetings just like this one, where the people that were in our community tell us what they've used, how they've used it, and provide us with feedback. In addition to that, they tell us about what pain points are having outside of our solution, so we can have that and put that and have that as part of our perspective, and celebrate the wins, and obviously, commiserate the losses as well. And on the customer side, one of the things that we do is in these early days, we won't take on a customer that's not willing to give us the benefit of the doubt, because by so many measures, we are underfunded, we're understaffed, and we're innovating exponentially, kind of 10x at scale. If you look at behind the curtain, it's crazy what we're able to produce with such a small team. And so we ask, and we kind of somewhat vet for companies that are willing to give us the benefit of the doubt, because there's a lot of learning and there's a lot of iterating, and for that we are grateful, but it's awesome responsibility. So whenever we do mess up, we own it, and we quickly resolve it and kind of go from there. And that's what we've done since the beginning, and we'll continue to do that.
Okay, I'm getting a signal that we should stop talking, which is unfortunate, because I feel like I want to talk about this for a very long time more with all of you, including people who are typing into the chat. So what I'll do is I'm going to kick it over to you, Jina, in 1 second, but I'll just do a global wrap by saying a couple of things. So I think that there are a number of things about this topic that we think are really interesting from a data and technology perspective, but at the same time are incredibly important from a can we accomplish our social impact goals and reach our North Star perspective. And I think a theme that I heard across Amber and Sterling and Jina is that no one organization or person or group can do this alone. Everyone brings their unique perspective and expertise, and this is something that we all need to do together. So part of our framing this as a challenge is not necessarily to attack specific vendors directly, but to think about whether we can challenge everyone to work together on fixing this and thinking through some of the different aspects. Some of our particular interests are around the data and how to create a more robust data set that can be used by some of these platforms and tools. And this is a really interesting opportunity, because this is the type of technology where the more data there is, the better it is for every developer, not just for one technology provider alone. And so we think that this collaborative solution is actually perfectly paired for this technology tool. We also have some questions about the different foundational models and whether there are different privacy preserving ones. Like, do we think that, sort of like behavioral models are better than, just strict data models and algorithms? Can we do this in a way where we collect information based on actions rather than cookies and secret hoard like stashes of your data that are collected without your knowing? Can we do this in a way that empowers you to understand that your data has value and how you can leverage that? And then we also have some just key questions about what does it mean to implement? There are a ton of things, I think Jina and Amber both pointed out about the particular functionalities of these kinds of platforms that are just user design research questions, right? That are on top of all of this, that make them tools that actually become companions the way that we think there's potential for these things to become. So these are some of our research questions. We hope that you'll join us, and I'll kick it back to Eugene. I'm sorry we capped the end of the hour, I guess.
No, that was awesome. Yeah, I agree with Sharon. Like, I wish this conversation go for another hour. I hope everyone else feels that way too, and kind of the general engagement. As Sharon noted, we're currently in flight with a lot of this kind of the assembling and organization of this curiosity agenda, and how we're thinking about research that needs to be conducted in a way where we're convening groups like this in order to help inform and advise on what that should look like. And that's very important as we think around like some short-term goals on releasing some rapid insights by the summer. But as noted, so much more needs to be done. What we're trying to do with this, and why we've kind of all organized you all to join us, is, our initial goals are really to establish this network of strategic partnerships, diverse stakeholders, those from the technologists to the data to the populations that would benefit or at most risk to these technologies to come together in an effort to think through what are some appropriate protocols, design principles that could be utilized in the field as these platforms are being developed. But as noted in the conversation, we know that, as Sterling, as you noted, right, rapid iteration is one of the keys to helping us get into a place where we're putting action above insight. And so with that, the second part of really what we're trying to do outside of just the general research and convening is really to set forth a challenge. And I'll hand this back to Sharon really quickly, just to give an overview on how we think this is going to act out.
Oh, I'm just going to make it up. No, I think that one of the things that we were thinking is we have had tremendous amount of success co-developing together in cohorts. A lot of the work that we have been doing so far with the Verifiable Credentials Project is not only in sort of thinking about standards and technical protocols and principles, but how can the community of developers come together to demonstrate that all of the tools become better over time if we collaborate. And I think we very much want that to be sort of the action step for all of this. So once we start thinking about the market insights and some of the research around the data collection and the AI and the foundational models and the app development, let's see if we can't get a group of the developers to come together and say, like, okay, we have collectively worked on data. You've given us input on the kinds of data that would make your products better. Let's implement them together to see if they do get us to better outcomes. And let's see if we can, and this is the thing about my LinkedIn recommendations, I can't really thumbs down them, right? And let's see if we can't create an environment where there's feedback given on whether the models have improved and whether the tools have given people access to opportunity in the way that we want them to. So I think that that's where we're thinking, like, spend some time doing a bit of research, market insights, community building, and then build some of these public resources that we think are important for everyone to have, which is thinking about how to expand the data in the data set, but also improve the quality, maybe partnering with people with access, like CBEN, for example, and some of the other groups that have been working on this data for some time, thinking about how to add context to what we have, working with people who are developing tools, like Sterling, your team, as well as others that are in the JFF Ventures orbit, as well as, you know, some of the others that and I mean, putting it out in the open for everyone to work with us on this. And then finally, getting like some very valuable feedback from you know, people who are not in the middle of the bell curve to really say, like, you know, could this really work for the people we need it to work for? Because if I don't get this cat carer job, or if I don't become a social media influencer, I feel like maybe Christina will continue to pay me and that'll be fine. But you know, there are consequences that are very, like I think Jina described, for the populations that we are the most concerned about. So I think we are at a point where there's tremendous amount of opportunity. There's a lot of interest, and there are a lot of smart people that we want to bring together to work on this.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sharon. Our next steps, obviously, after this, and we encourage you all to reach out with ways that we might be able to collaborate and participate. We will definitely follow up with you all as well as we think around some of the next steps. But yeah, we encourage you all to take this back to your networks and have these dialogues internally and externally as well. Christina, I'll leave it to you if you have any final remarks here before we wrap up.
Fantastic discussion. Really appreciate the engagement and, you know, pushing points that we typically don't do on conversation. So again, encourage you all to engage, connect with one another if you haven't already on LinkedIn. I know some of us have had some back end conversations even during this conversation. So let's build this community. Let's keep pushing, holding each other accountable. And also asking the hard questions. So reach out to us if you have questions, reach out if there's anything that you may want to partner on. I'm sure in 3 days, people are going to say, oh, we were just having this conversation. You want to circle back, please do not hesitate to do so with this team. But you're part of our discussion and family now. And so we expect to see you soon. But let's keep the conversation going. Again, thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, and thank you to our panelists again for joining us. We'll all be in touch. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you.